Welcome to the Math Ed podcast. My name is Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and my guest is Yusuke Uegatani, who is from Hiroshima University High School in Fukuyama. Yusuke, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much for giving me this valuable opportunity.
Yeah, I saw Yusuke's new article in Educational Studies in Mathematics, and I wanted to talk to him about it a little bit. The article is in volume 118, and it's called Decentralizing Mathematics: Mutual Development of Spontaneous and Mathematical Concepts via Informal Reasoning. So, to start out with this article, it deals with the concept of informal reasoning, and there are some connections to statistics. So, I wondered if we could start by, in the context of statistics, just describing for us what is informal reasoning. And then, when you looked at past research on informal reasoning, how did that past research tend to look at it?
Yeah, thank you. In the context of statistics, informal reasoning means making generalizations beyond the given data. Students often do this generalization using informal or everyday knowledge. However, past research has looked at informal reasoning in a limited way. It follows what we call the semi-formal perspective. The perspective focuses on the knowledge and data that support students' conclusions. It treats student reasoning as if it works like formal logic. It assumes that once students' knowledge is clear, their reasoning leads to one conclusion. But this view misses something important. Students often generate several possible answers. They compare them and choose the one that seems the most reasonable. The same formal perspective does not explain this process. That's why we think it is important to consider other perspectives.
Yeah, and I know this interest in this topic is not just yourself, but you're also with your co-authors. I wonder too if you want to just let us know the team that was working with you on this.
In this article, my co-authors are Hiroki Otani and Taro Fujita.
Great. And then with that background, I wonder if you could let us know what was the main goal that was driving this article that you wrote.
Thank you. My goal with this article was twofold. First, I wanted to introduce what we call the negotiation perspective. This perspective focuses on something often overlooked. It highlights how students create multiple alternatives during their reasoning. Second, I wanted to explore the connection with a philosophical framework. The framework is called inferentialism. Inferentialism gives us a new way to think about conceptual development in mathematics learning. It helps us understand how students learn mathematical concepts through reasoning.
Hmm. And in the article, you really bring to life two ideas, two perspectives. There's the semi-formal perspective, which you already alluded to, but that runs through the article. And then there's also the negotiation perspective, and you bring out some rich things that can come from thinking about informal reasoning in the negotiation perspective. So I wonder if you could just help us understand that distinction a little bit more, semi-formal perspective and the negotiation perspective, and then let us know why is that distinction important?
Our key insight is students' informal reasoning depends on the alternatives they can imagine. They do not always go straight from knowledge and data to one conclusion. Instead, they often think of several possible answers. Then, they choose the one that seems most reasonable. For example, in our paper, we discussed a case about air pollution. Students were asked whether the pollution levels were dangerous. Here, it matters how many options they consider. Do they think they must choose only between dangerous or not dangerous? Or do they also consider a third option? We don't have enough data to judge. If they include that third option, they may avoid giving a clear yes or no. This kind of thinking is what we call the negotiation perspective. In contrast, the semi-formal perspective focuses only on what knowledge students use. It tries to trace the reasoning back to the data and prior knowledge, but that might not be enough. To really understand their reasoning, we need to ask more. We should ask what other options did they consider, and why did they avoid such option? The negotiation perspective tells us to include these questions in our research.
Yeah, and it's great to see in the article too these other things that can be considered and can be added into the conversation, and then also the reasoning that can happen around those. So, well, if we consider that, here's a counterpoint, or here's some more evidence that we would need. And so it's not just getting multiple perspectives out there, but each of those multiple perspectives, it seems like it brings a lot more conversation and a lot more reasoning that comes to it. So it really seems to enrich the experience to have that negotiation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really encourage listeners to check out the article. It's in Educational Studies and Mathematics, but it's also open access, which is really nice. Anybody can go and grab the article. And if the listeners become readers and they read that article, what is something that you hope they would take away from the article, like a bigger idea? And also for yourself or your team, what are your next steps in this work?
Our article is titled Decentralizing Mathematics, but this does not mean that mathematics education should be absorbed into other fields. On the contrary, we value mathematics education as its own research domain. It has a unique identity that should be respected. As a high school teacher, I have often seen students struggle. They find it difficult because of the structure of the mathematical content itself. I understand how real and serious that struggle is, but it is exactly because of this experience that I want to promote decentralization. As human beings, we are influenced by the ideas we care about. Sometimes this leads us to make irrational choices. In mathematics education, there is often an unspoken assumption. People assume that mathematics is always the central factor in students' learning. They believe this no matter what the actual content is. But we think this assumption needs to be questioned. In areas like informal reasoning, mathematical modeling, and computer-based problem solving, we believe that non-mathematical concepts can play an important role. These are often everyday or spontaneous ideas. Such concepts may help activate the related mathematical ideas and may not activate as unexpected. So, we should treat informal knowledge as central, not just secondary. That said, in this paper, we only discuss this idea using already published data. Our next step is to carry out our own design research. In fact, I'm currently working on a design research project. It investigates how non-mathematical concepts influence my students' statistical reasoning. Now I'm analyzing the data from the project. Once the analysis is complete, I plan to publish the results.
All right, that's great. Well, Yusuke, thank you so much for this little brief look into the article. And as I mentioned, it's open access, so I hope people can take a look at it in more detail. I enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better. I also have another question to maybe learn about another side of you. So you're teaching mathematics there over in Japan, but I wonder if you were not in mathematics education or stats education or anything like that, is there something you imagine as an alternative career for yourself?
That's a very interesting question. It really sparks my imagination. I'm not sure if this is an alternative career because I am already doing something similar, but I would love to be a researcher in the philosophy of mathematics.
Hmm.
When I was a high school student, I started wondering about something. Mathematics is supposed to be objective, but some students understand it quickly while others struggle. This made me question what it really means to say mathematics is objective, or why feel that way. So for me, becoming a philosopher is a very attractive career. As I wrote in my ESM article, I am now working with philosophers in Japan. They specialize in inferentialism and the philosophy of mathematics. I'm very lucky to collaborate with them, and I find it very, very happy.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I had a really good friend in undergraduate who was a philosophy major, and I was a math major. We had some really great
Yeah.
conversations. We still stay in touch, and he lives over in China now. He did kind of Eastern philosophy. But for me right now, my dabbling in philosophy is actually reading comic books. There's some good comic books called Action Philosophers. They take some
Oh,
main ideas of philosophers and they put them into kind of fun comic book stories, but they actually do. Fred Van Lente is a good writer. He shares some of the key ideas of their thinking. So for me, I'm reading comic books about philosophy and you're actually working with philosophers.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me a very, very valuable opportunity.